This has been created with only CSS and HTML. Not a single line of JavaScript is required to create an interactive animated widget that looks and works like this. HTML Details element is one of the newer additions to HTML that is fully interactive and that allows you to create a widget like this. And with the newer additions to CSS, you can fully animate it without resorting to any hacks or any JavaScript whatsoever. Here's how it works. HTML Details is an interactive element that hides a little bit of content on the page. By default, only a label of this element is visible, like you see right here, CSS Weekly Newsletter, for example, and the rest of the content is by default hidden, but once you open this widget by clicking on the label, then the rest of the content will be visible. In HTML, you have details element that looks like this. And within details, there is a summary element, which is the label that discloses what kind of information is hidden within that container. And this summary element has to be the first child of the details element. And then after the summary comes the content that will be hidden or shown depending on the state where this widget is in. In this example, I have all my content in this div details content, but this is not really necessary for this element to work. So this is all you need to create a fully functional interactive widget that hides and shows a little bit of content. Styling this element in CSS is straightforward. All you need to do is you need to target details and summary elements. And of course, you can very easily target the rest of the content. We can add classes, IDs, or you can target them directly as children of details element. As you can see, I've already added a little bit of styling to my details and summary elements and also to the content that is right within our details element. One thing to note here is that you can very easily style the open state of this widget, because when the details is in the state of open, then the attribute open will be added to it. I will open Developer Tools to show you exactly how this looks. Command-Shift-C, and I will immediately inspect this particular details element. As you see, when it's in state of open, attribute open is present on this HTML element, and if I close it, then the attribute will disappear. So if you want to style the open state of this widget, all you need to do is target details with the attribute open and style it however you want. This is how you would do this in CSS. Details and in parentheses open. I will actually use class details here because my every details element in HTML has a class details. Before we dig into animating this element, which is not really as simple as you might think, I want to show you how to actually see exactly how this element works directly in Developer Tools. All interactive HTML elements, including details, are created with a number of moving parts within them, which are actually shadowed down. By default, they are not visible in DevTools, but you can very easily expose them. Let's do that right now. I will open Settings in my Developer Tools, and I will search in the Preference pane under the section Elements, the option Show User Agent Shadowed Down. I will enable this, and once I do, my details element will expose its inner shadowed down. I will expand this. Here you see shadow root element, which was not visible before, and if I expand it, I can see the slot details summary, which is summary that we've created, this right here, and the slot details content, which is, as you can see here, labeled as pseudo details content. This is styled as display block content visibility hidden. We have not added any styling here, so these are the default browser styles that are applied to the content of our details element. And this essentially tells me that I can target the content of this element by using pseudo class details content. In CSS, this would look exactly like this. Details, and pseudo class is going to be details minus content. This is actually pseudo element, not pseudo class. And now I can style it however I like. Just for example, I will set font style here to italic so you can see that it actually does work. And my text here now is italic exactly as I would expect. Let's replace our content class, this one here, details content, with our pseudo element details content. And I will remove font style italic. I don't really want this right here. Now margin inline that I had earlier should be applied here, but it doesn't seem to be working. By default, this details content element, if you inspect it, you'll see it exactly in the Developer Tools, is set to display contents. This essentially means that this element doesn't have its own box, but rather it allows its children to have their content visible at the top of the tree. So what we can do here is we can switch this to display block, and in that case, our margin would actually work. And now as you see, margin inline is working and our content is aligned. All right, now what if we want to animate opening and closing of this particular element? Now, the easiest way would be to add transition to our details content, because this is what is changing size. And once we do that, we just transition the block size, which is essentially height or logical equivalent of the height property. And if we do that, the element should be expanding and contracting as you would expect. Of course, the challenge with this is that it's not that easy to animate block size or height property to size auto. It just doesn't work in the browser by default, but luckily there is a new CSS function, calc-size, which allows you to work around that issue. If you want to learn exactly how this works, I have a separate video where I explain it in details, so check it out. Link should be on the screen and it will be in the description. In any case, if we want to animate it, we will need to use calc-size function. So let's start by applying block size on this widget when it's closed. I will close my developer tools because I don't really need them at this moment. And here on my details content, I will add block size 0 because this is the default state when the element is closed. I will add another selector here, dot details with the attribute open, and I will target details content. In this case, block size is going to be auto. And we want to actually transition this. We will transition block size property, transition property block size. Transition duration should be something like 0.5 seconds. And if we test it now, it won't work. Nothing will be transitioned because we can't transition from block size 0 to block size auto. So instead of block size auto, we will have calc-size auto. And now if I test it out, it's still not going to work when I close it. It will work when I open it. And it's not working when I close it because we need to set transition behavior to allow-discrete. Again, if you want to learn more about this and why is this necessary in this particular example, check my other video on how to animate to hide auto or from display none. And we will set here transition behavior to allow-discrete. If you remember from developer tools, I will open it again. We are actually setting, when this element is closed, content visibility to hidden, and this property is not animatable, which is exactly why we will add content visibility here as well, because we do want to transition that, even though this property is not transitionable. I'll explain exactly how it works right now. Content visibility. Transition behavior allow-discrete tells the browser for the properties that are not transitionable or animatable, like content visibility, because content can either be visible or hidden, there's no state between. Browser then understands to wait with transitioning of this property until the transition is completely done. Or rather, when you transition the element in, the browser will immediately set content visibility property, which is not an animatable property, to visible so the animation can happen, and vice versa on transition out, it will wait until the transition is fully finished, or 0.5 seconds in this example, before changing the state of this property, content visibility, to hidden. That is how it allows the animations to happen that require changing some properties that are essentially not animatable, like content visibility in this example, or display is another example. Let's try it out. Animation in is working and animation out is working just as well. That is how simple it is to animate the details element using few new additions to CSS. The downside at this particular moment is, unfortunately, that this is only supported in Chrome Canary. Calc-size is supported in Chrome Canary behind the flag experimental web platform features. The good thing, of course, is that you can use this as progressive enhancement today. That's why we will leave block size auto here as well, because if the browser doesn't support calc-size, it will revert back to block size auto, which means the element will be fully interactive and will work as expected. It just won't be animated. So you can start using it today as progressive enhancement, and once browser starts supporting calc-size, this will work exactly as expected. And transition behavior allow-discrete is supported in all modern browsers except in Firefox. Firefox should be working on it as we speak, but at the moment of recording, it still isn't supported. So in browsers that are still not supporting those properties, the widget will not be animated, but it will be fully functional. The last thing that I want to show you here is how to animate this arrow. And this arrow is actually coming from display list style, because by default, summary is set to list style, which means it has its own marker that can be targeted using the marker pseudo class and changed. So let's see how we can change this and then animate it so it flips from the closed state to the open state. Before we go on, I noticed one small problem with the animation, and it's very visible on the last item because the content is overflowing. So I will add overflow hidden to details content because I don't want text to go outside of the borders of this element. Let's say I try here, overflow hidden. And now the animation should look much smoother, and indeed it does. So let's try changing the marker on this list item or on this summary element. I will add a new selector here. Summary marker. This is pseudo element, and you can change the marker by using the content property. So let's do that. You can set it to anything you want, but I like this arrow in particular, so I will change it exactly to this. The downside of the marker pseudo class is that it doesn't support all CSS properties. It's quite a bit restricted, mainly to font properties and such. Let's open it on MDN. Here in the docs, you'll see that available properties for the marker pseudo elements are font properties, whitespace color, some text properties, content property, animation, and transition properties. Unfortunately, this means that we cannot really animate it, or rather rotate it, because transform property is not supported on this element. So we cannot do something like details open summary marker. And now here we could do something like rotate 90 degrees to actually flip it exactly as we want, and then we can also transition this rotation. But unfortunately, this doesn't work because marker doesn't support this. So the common practice for this example is to actually replace the marker with pseudo element, because pseudo element supports all properties that we will need, including setting margins here and transitioning using the rotate property. Let's set content of our marker to none, because we will use the pseudo class for this, and summary will actually have for pseudo class with content set exactly to what we had before, this beautiful arrow. Now we can tweak this, style this, and animate this. First, we will set it to position absolute, because in order to transform it, this is what we will need. And now, as this element is no longer taking space right here because it's outside of the flow, we will need to tweak our summary padding. So instead of 0.5 rem, let's set it to 2 rem. This looks pretty much okay, but we will also need to position this relatively because we want to position our summary before element in context of this particular summary element itself. There we go. And now summary before can be positioned a little bit to the left. Inset inline start, let's try 1 rem, and inset block start should be something like minus 0.05 rem units. I played around with this and tweaked it before recording, so that's how I know how to set it up. It's always a good idea to play around with those values to find the ideal spot that you want to use when you're doing something like this. And so inset block start is going to be minus 0.05 rem units. There we go. And now for our open state, we want to rotate this summary before pseudo element. The details in the state of open, or rather when the attribute open is present, we will target summary before pseudo element, and we will rotate it by 90 degrees. Rotation seems okay, but it's not ideal in terms of vertical alignment, so we will again tweak inset block start and set it to something like 0.05 rem units. This is looking okay, but it's still not animated, or rather transitioned. And to transition this, as transform is transitionable property, all we need to do is add transition to our summary before pseudo element, and it will work. Let's transition rotate over the course of 0.2 seconds. Let's test it out. It is really nicely animated, as you can see here. And with this, we basically have fully animated details element. Our arrow is rotated and animated, and our content just as well as being transitioned out. Block size or height of this element is nicely transitioned and animated. One last thing that I want to show you before we sign out is that you can actually connect all of those details elements, and when one is open, the other will automatically close. For this, you can use the name attribute on the details element and set it to the same value for the details elements that you want to connect. So they don't have to be one next to another. They can be on different spots in HTML, but as long as they have the same name, they will be connected, and as you open one of those, others will automatically close. Let's try it out. I will set name on my details element to CSS Weekly. And I will paste this to all my details elements. Now, when I open one of those items, the other will automatically close. So we have created a really nice animated interactive widget with pure CSS and HTML. I didn't mention this before, but you can directly add open attribute to any one of those elements, and it will be by default open on the page when the page loads. Let's try it out. I'll use open on this first element, and if I refresh the browser, you'll see that this item is automatically opened, just as it should be, and of course I can close it whenever I like, and our connected values are still working. There is one downside with this name attribute on details element. Unfortunately, again, Firefox is still not supporting this. So those connected items, those connected to details element will not work in Firefox, but they will work in all other modern browsers. So you can use them safely again as progressive enhancement. Thank you so much for your attention. My name is Zoran Jambor. I will see and hear you in a different CSS transition, or rather, in the next video, and particularly in this one if you want to learn more about transition behavior. Until then, bye.